During a live TV taping in Nashville on March 4, 1975, Elvis Presley expected harmless questions about his tour. But when the host tried to joke about Elvis's young daughter, the king didn't laugh. He stood up. What happened next stunned the studio, shook the network, and became one of the most replayed clips in fan history. The lights inside WTVF Studio B were brighter than usual that night. They weren't just lighting a set, they were lighting a moment that felt too big for the room holding it. More than 180 people packed shoulder to shoulder into the bleacher seats, fanning themselves with ticket stubs, whispering about the sold-out show Elvis had performed just hours earlier at the Municipal Auditorium. 10,000 fans there, nearly 200 here, but the energy felt just as strong. Elvis walked in quietly, head bowed for a second as if he were catching his breath. His navy suit glowed under the overhead lamps, and around his neck hung a thin silver locket. Inside it was a tiny photo of Lisa Marie, taken during one of their weekend visits. He touched it out of habit, the way someone touches a memory they don't want to forget. The crowd murmured, waves of soft excitement moving row to row. A fan whispered, "He looks tired," and another replied, "He always gives everything." Elvis smiled faintly as he took his seat, brushing dust from the wooden armrest. Even the studio floor seemed to hum, as though the building itself knew something unusual was about to happen. The host walked out with his cue cards, wearing the kind of grin that said he loved being on television. "We've got a fun show tonight," he joked. "A little music, a little family talk." He winked toward the audience, and the front row chuckled. But Elvis didn't laugh. He simply adjusted his suit cuffs and folded his hands. For a moment, everything seemed normal. Cameras clicked.
A boom mic shifted overhead.
A stagehand whispered, "Stand by," and the red light blinked on above camera one. Then Elvis felt it, that strange little shift in the air. The kind you feel when someone is about to cross a line they shouldn't. He didn't know the exact words yet, but he knew the shape of them. He'd been around show hosts long enough to recognize when a man was about to aim for a cheap laugh at someone else's expense. The host shuffled his cards again, slower this time, glancing at the locket as if it were part of a comedy routine instead of a father's keepsake. Elvis noticed. The crowd did too, though they didn't know why they felt uneasy. A faint mic crackle buzzed through the speakers. A signal almost like a warning. People leaned forward, waiting. Why do we sense danger before we understand it? And what responsibility do we carry when someone mocks the people we love? The host's smirk widened. He looked straight at Elvis, then at the locket again, as if he were winding up a joke he thought the whole world would laugh at. Elvis didn't move. He just stared back, eyes steady. Then the host breathed in, ready to deliver the line that would push everything off its rails. And that's when Elvis felt his whole body go still. The moment was arriving. The moment the cameras rolled again, the host leaned back in his chair like a man preparing a punchline. He flashed his rehearsed smile toward the bleachers, soaking in the soft laughter warming the room. Elvis waited patiently, hands folded, eyes calm. He looked like someone ready to answer a simple question. But the room didn't yet realize what was coming. "So, Elvis?" the host began, tapping his card with his pen. "With you touring so much, does your daughter even remember what her daddy looks like?" The joke landed like a crack in the floor. A few people laughed, but it wasn't real laughter. It was the nervous kind, thin, uncertain, wrong. Elvis didn't laugh at all. His expression dropped so fast that several people in the front row stopped smiling mid-breath. His hand tightened around the silver locket. His thumb rubbed across the smooth metal, almost the way someone steadies themselves before saying something important. The host, oblivious to the shift, chuckled again. "Come on now, I'm just teasing. Kids grow fast, don't they?" The room went colder. Producer Janet Collins, standing behind the camera line with her clipboard pressed to her chest, leaned into her headset. "We may have a problem," she whispered. She watched Elvis's eyes, the way they turned from soft to sharp, the way they locked on the host's face and didn't move. Elvis's silence was louder than any answer. The crowd sensed it. They sat straighter. A ripple of discomfort moved through the bleachers. Someone coughed. Someone else whispered, "Oh." Then Elvis inhaled slowly, the kind of breath a person takes when they're deciding whether to stay quiet or speak their truth. The host didn't get the hint. He was too busy enjoying the applause sign flashing above the audience. I mean, she must go weeks without seeing you, he continued lightly. Does she confuse you with her security guards? Shock sentence. A bad one. Janet covered her mouth. A man in the third row muttered. He shouldn't be said that. Elvis leaned forward. Not fast. Not dramatic. Just a careful, deliberate motion that carried more weight than a shout ever could. He moved close enough that the mic picked up the soft scrape of his chair. The tiny sound made the entire studio go silent. What did you say? Elvis asked quietly. The host froze. I was just joking, Elvis. Just. Repeat it. The crowd stiffened. A low hum filled the room. Not from the equipment, but from the tension gathering like a storm. Even the stagehands looked up from behind the curtains. Elvis didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His calm was scarier than anger. Why do some jokes cut like blades instead of landing as humor? And how far should anyone go to protect the people they love? The host swallowed hard, throat bobbing. His cue cards trembled between his fingers. Then Elvis leaned even closer, voice dropping into a lower register, the one every fan recognized instantly. He was ready to answer the insult, and nothing in the room would stay the same after he did. The host stared at Elvis, unsure whether he had heard the question wrong or simply pushed it too far. The silence that followed felt unnatural, the kind of silence that doesn't drift into a studio but punches its way in. Even the air seemed to tighten. Elvis didn't blink. Repeat it, he said again, calm but unshakably firm. The host's smile collapsed into something small and nervous. I was just making a light joke, Elvis, about, your daughter seeing you with all the traveling you do. The audience didn't laugh this time. Their eyes bounced between the two men as if watching a fuse burn toward a dangerous line. Elvis straightened his suit jacket slowly. A simple motion, but one that made the room shift its weight. He placed both feet firmly on the ground, grounding himself. You think that's funny? He asked quietly. Shock sentence. The crowd inhaled as one. A security guard near the edge of the stage took one step forward, unsure if he should intervene or simply stand by. Even the boom operator froze his arm midair, holding the microphone perfectly still in the space between them. Elvis leaned closer to the host, but his voice remained calm. I haven't missed a single visit with my daughter. Not one. His tone was level, steady, but carried a weight that hooked every ear in the room. When I'm on tour, I fly in between shows. I cross states. I drive through the night, just to spend 1 hour with her. The audience didn't clap. They didn't dare. They listened. A woman in the back wiped the corner of her eye. A man in the third row murmured, "He means it." The host tried to chuckle. "Elvis, I was just joking," Elvis said, finishing the sentence for him. "I heard you." He sat back slightly but kept his eyes locked on the host. "But you don't joke about children. You don't joke about a father being there. You don't joke about the part of someone's life they'd fight heaven and earth to protect." The room fell so quiet that even the camera's electrical hum became clear. Janet Collins, the producer, raised her hand toward the control booth. "Cut to break," she whispered, but the control booth didn't move. A voice crackled through the comms. "Keep rolling." Elvis folded his hands again, but his voice dropped into that unmistakable lower register, the one every lifelong fan recognized instantly. It wasn't anger. It wasn't shouting. It was truth spoken without apology. "I love my little girl," he said softly. "And if you knew how hard I worked to keep that relationship strong, you'd never joke about it." The crowd shifted, leaning in, supporting him without speaking. Their silence became a kind of shield around him, the kind only genuine emotion can create. Why does a room freeze when someone finally tells the truth? And who has the right to poke at the places we guard the most? The host swallowed hard. He lifted his cue cards as if searching for an exit in the middle of a burning hallway. Then he tried to pivot. "Let's move to something lighter." Elvis lifted a hand. Small movement, massive impact. The host stopped instantly. The studio waited, breath held. Something was about to break, and not the way anyone expected. The second Elvis lifted his hand, the studio froze. Not one camera operator moved. Not one stagehand breathed too loudly. Even the host's pen, which he'd been fidgeting with for the last several minutes, slipped from his fingers and clattered softly onto the table. Elvis didn't look angry. That's what startled everyone most. He looked calm. Too calm. The kind of calm that makes a room nervous, because people suddenly realize something meaningful is about to happen. He stood up slowly. One smooth motion.
No rush. No theatrics.
The crowd gasped. A sharp ripple of sound that bounced off the studio walls. Elvis rarely stood during sit-down interviews. It meant something. They didn't know what yet, but they could feel the weight of it coming. He reached into his suit pocket and pulled out the small silver locket. The lights glinted off its surface as he placed it on the table in front of the host. For a moment, it looked like the only thing in the room with a pulse. Elvis opened the locket with a soft click. Inside was the tiny picture of Lisa Marie, smiling at the camera. "That's my girl," he said. 3 words. Sharp, gentle, undeniable. The host's face fell. His shoulders sank as if gravity had suddenly doubled just for him. Elvis didn't raise his voice. "She's not a joke," he said, still soft, still steady. "Kids aren't punchlines. Not mine. Not anyone's." A shock sentence. A moral delivered like a whisper. The room shifted again, this time from tension into something deeper. Admiration. Respect. A collective breath held between 2 heartbeats. Elvis placed both hands on the table and leaned forward, not aggressively, but with a warmth that disarmed the room. "You want to know where I go after a show?" he said. "I go to her. If I can reach her, I do. Even if it means crossing states at midnight. Even if it means 1 hour of holding her hand and hearing her say, 'Daddy, look what I drew.'" Somewhere in the crowd, a woman began to cry silently. A father in the 3rd row straightened in his seat, eyes locked on Elvis, feeling every word in his own chest. Elvis continued, "You think it's funny to ask if she remembers my face? Let me tell you something." He took a small breath. "She never forgets." The host looked down, cheeks flushed, the weight of his mistake settling heavily into his posture. Elvis didn't humiliate him. He didn't scold him. He did something far more powerful. He told the truth with compassion. And compassion can feel like thunder. Suddenly, the father in the 3rd row stood up. His Tennessee Volunteers cap tilted forward as he wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. His voice shook. "My little girl's all I've got," he said. "If someone said something like that about her, I don't know what I'd do." The crowd murmured in agreement. Heads nodded. A few people whispered, "That's right," under their breath. Elvis turned to the man and gave him a small, respectful nod. "You're a good father," he said gently. "You understand." The father's lips trembled. He sat down slowly, overwhelmed. People in the studio weren't watching a celebrity anymore. They were watching a father defend the heart of his life. Short bursts landed like soft punches. "He stands. He opens the locket. That's my girl. No more jokes." The host finally exhaled. A long, shaky breath, like someone waking from a moment they couldn't control. But the moment wasn't over, because something unexpected was about to enter the room. From the far side of the stage, a studio intern hurried forward, pushing a small cart. On top of it was the playback tape. The intern pushed the cart closer, her nervous footsteps echoing across the stage floor. The playback tape sat on top, a large black reel with a white label that read Segment A in smudged marker. Nobody knew why she was bringing it out now. Not the crowd, not the host, not even Elvis. But it didn't matter yet, because the moment belonged to the audience now. The man in the Tennessee Volunteers cap remained on his feet, breathing heavily, as if speaking those words had cracked something open inside him. His voice had trembled the way truth often does when it's finally spoken. "My little girl's all I've got," he repeated softly. almost to himself. I'd lose my mind if someone joked about her. A ripple moved through the bleachers. People nodded. People murmured. People felt it. A schoolteacher in the second row stood up next. She clutched her handbag to her chest as if it gave her courage. "Kids hear everything," she said, voice shaking. "Jokes like that, they don't forget. They take it to heart." The host swallowed hard. Sweat collected at his hairline. He wasn't being attacked, but he was being held accountable by a room full of strangers who suddenly understood each other. Elvis listened patiently, eyes steady, shoulders soft. He didn't gloat. He didn't smirk. He let the room speak because he knew this wasn't about him winning a moment. It was about something bigger, something human. A young woman near the aisle raised her hand. "My dad worked 2 jobs," she said. "He'd come home exhausted, but I always remembered his face. Always. Kids remember love." The room hummed with quiet agreement. The host finally spoke, voice trembling. "Elvis, I'm sorry," he said. "That joke, it wasn't fair. I crossed a line." Elvis nodded gently. "Thank you," he said. "Apologizing, that takes something." The host seemed shocked Elvis accepted it so gracefully. He blinked rapidly, like someone trying not to cry on camera. The control booth didn't dare cut away. This wasn't entertainment anymore. This was people healing in real time. The crowd sensed it too. They weren't watching a celebrity moment. They were becoming part of a shared truth. A truth every parent, every child, every family could feel. Why do shared stories heal faster than arguments? And what makes a room full of strangers suddenly feel like family? Elvis turned to the father in the cap again. "You're not alone," he said. "No parent is." The father nodded back, eyes red, trying to smile. Then Elvis looked toward the teacher. "You're right," he said. "Kids don't forget. They carry the things we say." The teacher lowered her head, touched by the acknowledgement. A soft warmth filled the studio, the kind that only appears when people finally stop trying to look strong and simply allow themselves to be human. Then the intern wheeled the cart all the way to the front. She leaned toward the producer and whispered something too quietly for the mic to catch. Janet Collins's eyes widened. She turned sharply toward the control booth. "They want us to play it back," she whispered. "Right now." The host froze. Elvis raised an eyebrow. The audience leaned forward as if pulled by a string. The tape reel clicked as the intern locked it into the machine. Something unexpected was about to happen, and it would change how the world saw this moment forever. The tape machine clicked as the intern locked the reel into place. The audience leaned forward in a single motion, almost as if someone had pulled the entire room toward the cart. The host looked terrified. Elvis stayed calm, hands resting gently on the table, silver locket still open beside him. Janet Collins raised her hand toward the booth. "We're rolling," she whispered. Then, the studio monitors flickered to life. A soft tape hiss filled the speakers, that familiar crackling sound of 1970s television. The crowd went silent. On the monitors, the moment replayed, the joke, the forced laughter, the way Elvis's face had dropped like a curtain falling. Hearing it again was worse, much worse. People in the bleachers winced. A few covered their mouths. One woman shook her head and whispered, "He really said that." The host looked down at his desk, cheeks burning red. Watching his own mistake from 10 minutes earlier somehow made it feel older, like a bad memory you wish you could erase. Elvis didn't look at the host. He watched the tape, calm, still, resolute. The clip showed the exact moment Elvis leaned in and said, "Repeat it." The crowd inside the studio, watching themselves on the monitor, gasped a second time, realizing just how sharp the shift had been. Then the monitor displayed Elvis standing, opening the locket, revealing his daughter's smile. The room grew warm with emotion all over again, the way a bruise hurts twice when pressed. A man in the front whispered, "He did that with so much respect." A woman replied, "That's why it went viral." The tape ended with Elvis saying, "Kids aren't punchlines." Then the screen went black. Nobody spoke. It felt like the air had thickened with meaning, filling every inch of the studio. Janet pressed her headset to her ear. They're saying don't cut anything, she murmured, voice trembling. Not a second. Air all of it. The host blinked. All of it. All of it, she repeated. It was the decision that would change everything. The network didn't want a polished interview. They wanted the truth, the realness, the rawness, the moment lightning struck. When the show aired on March 12, 1975, it reached millions. Families watched it after dinner. Fan clubs recorded it onto bootleg VHS tapes, copying the segment for friends until the picture blurred. Parents nodded at their TVs as Elvis defended what mattered most. Teenagers replayed the moment where he stood up, that soft, firm power. Newspapers printed the still shot, Elvis standing beside the locket. The Tennessean headlined it. The King defends his heart. The clip spread far beyond Tennessee. Radio hosts played the audio. Fan clubs wrote newsletters about it. Decades later, tourists visiting Graceland walked past a small bronze plaque added in 1994. It read, "The day Elvis defended what matters most." People touched it softly, as if touching a moment frozen in metal. Why do sincere moments last longer than staged ones? And what makes a simple act turn into a legend? For many, this was the answer. The world didn't remember the joke. It remembered the man who refused to let love be laughed at. And yet, the real emotional lesson of that day didn't come from Elvis himself. It came from someone else entirely. The studio felt different now. Softer, quieter, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath after witnessing something real. Elvis slowly closed the silver locket and slid it back into the pocket of his navy suit. His movements were calm again. Not heavy, not tense, just honest. People watched him the way you watch someone who has just revealed a part of their soul. The father in the Tennessee Volunteers cap wiped his eyes. The schoolteacher sat down gently, hand pressed to her heart. The host stared at the desk, humbled in a way he hadn't expected when he walked onto the stage that evening. Elvis looked around the room, his gaze landing on faces one by one. The tired mother in the fifth row, the couple holding hands in the back, the teenager gripping her jacket, the cameraman blinking tears he kept pretending weren't there. He placed both palms on the table, breathing out slowly. "Family," he said, "is something you honor." Simple words, soft words, but they carried the strength of a truth born from love. The crowd didn't clap. Not at first. They just absorbed the meaning, letting the sentence rest inside them. It was the kind of line you don't rush past. You sit with it. Elvis continued gently. People think strength is loud, and sometimes it is. But most of the time, strength is just choosing what matters. Choosing love. Choosing to stand up when someone crosses a line. A warm hush filled the room, the hush that comes when people recognize themselves in a story. Because everyone there had someone they would defend. A child, parent, a sibling, a friend. Someone whose name alone made their heart rise in their chest. Why do the quiet choices often become the most powerful ones? And who protects us when we're not in the room to defend ourselves? The host finally looked up, eyes red but sincere. "Elvis, thank you," he whispered, "for teaching me something tonight." Elvis gave him a small nod, not a victory nod, not a smug one, a human one. "We all learn," he replied, "every day." The cameras captured something rare. Two men sharing a moment that could have turned bitter, but instead turned honest. A soft wave of applause rose from the audience. Not wild, not explosive, just deeply appreciative. The kind of applause that isn't for entertainment, but for understanding. And that was the moment that stuck. Not the conflict, not the joke, not even the standing up, but the kindness after the fire. Decades later, people would still talk about this interview. They would replay it on old tapes, watch it in online clips, and mention it during tours at Graceland. They'd touch the plaque outside the museum and whisper, "He stood up for her." As if the love inside that moment still glowed across the years. Some stories go viral because they're dramatic, but others go viral because they remind people of who they want to be. This was the second kind. A reminder wrapped in truth, carried by a father, witnessed by the world. Family is something you honor. And Elvis meant every word. If this moment moved you, share this story with someone who understands what it means to protect the people you love. These moments don't survive because they're dramatic. They survive because they remind us who we are. Pass it on to a friend, a parent, or anyone who believes family is something you honor.